Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grasshopper's You and Your STEM Career. We're so excited to have you here. I know a lot of you are joining live, but a lot of you have requested the recording. So we will be sending this probably tomorrow morning. For those of you who don't know me, I am Heather Miller. I am the founder and CEO of Grasshopper, and that is Delilah, my dog in the background. Hopefully she will settle down in a minute. She always gets very excited when she hears the Zoom. Grasshopper is a mobile app for female and non-binary mentees and mentors. Our mission is to increase the number of women and diversity talent in leadership roles. On our app, you can build your profile, connect with peers and mentors, share knowledge, and share opportunities for roles. So hope you all download at some point. In addition to helping women connect on the platform, we provide tons of other resources like this webinar on personal and professional development for everyone, regardless of gender. And we're running today's particular webinar in honor of International Day of Women and Girls in Science. And we wanted to highlight the plethora of paths that one can take with a STEM background. On a personal note, my eyes were really open to this working at McKinsey and Company, which is a consulting firm. Ashley can speak to this. I was on a team whose sole purpose was to find people with non-traditional business backgrounds from the PhD worlds and MD worlds and bring their perspective to the firm. And on another personal note, my stepdaughter just graduated with a biochem degree and just got her first job in biotech. So the purpose of this webinar is to stress that a passion in STEM can take you down many, many different paths, and it's actually not a sin to stray from the traditional one. So without further ado, I would love to quickly introduce our panelists, and then I'm going to let them go deeper into their own backgrounds and journeys. But first, on the left, we have Ashley Fenn, who graduated with a PhD in neuroscience and a postdoc in immunology and is now an engagement manager at McKinsey. We have Joy Feng with a PhD in pharmaceutical and medicinal chemistry and a postdoc in enzymology. And she's now a senior principal scientist at Gilead Sciences. And then we have Olivia Simon, who was Vimeo's senior product manager and is now doing a postbac at Columbia and City College to pursue a doctorate in physical therapy. And then last but not least, we have Megan Aretti, who is a university student at Santa Clara University and, importantly, a Grasshopper business intern. She is going to moderate all of our questions at the end of the session. So on that note, please be sure to submit your questions into the Q&A function and we'll be sure to get to them. So let's go into our panelists and tell us a little bit more about your journeys and your paths. Maybe we'll just go left from right. Let's start with Ashley.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. So as Heather mentioned, I came from a PhD background in the life sciences. So I got my bachelor's from Colorado State University in biochemistry and zoology, double major, and then went on to a PhD in neuroscience from The Ohio State University. I focused there on neuroimmunology and really wanted to get more in depth in immunology as I headed down the academic path. So I went to do my postdoc at Harvard Med in immunology. While I was at Harvard Med, kind of became disenfranchised with academia for a variety of reasons that we can go into during Q&A or other periods, but I decided to look for something else. And I looked across quite a few different industries, just trying to find what would fit my personal and professional goals, and came across consulting. And it was something that I had never really heard of before really diving into it. And thank goodness I ended up being in Boston, because it kind of gave me a whole breadth of different consulting opportunities to look into, and to meet people that were down that path. And I decided to go for it. I liked the idea of solving problems and the idea of helping corporations and the people that work for them function better and do better. And interestingly enough, as Heather mentioned, you don't have to have a business background to succeed in doing something like that. So I joined McKinsey back in 2017, and you would think that with my background, I would want to do life science-based work, but I actually do anything but. So I mostly focus on operations-based work, and I do that in consumer goods as well as electric power, natural gas. So and happy to talk more about that as we go.
Thank you for that. Joy, let's hear from you.
I think you're on mute, Joy.
Oh, I need to remember, unmute myself. So I assume you can hear me. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad to meet everyone on this virtual world. So I was born and raised in China, and I got my bachelor's degree from Beijing Medical University. And then my focus actually is chemistry. And for the one who are in the field, chemistry and biology, they're very different. We have to make this distinction very early on. But then I came to the States went to graduate school and got my PhD actually in medicinal chemistry. Again, that's heavily organic synthesis focused. And then after that, I decided to actually change a little bit. I decided to go to biology, so that I did my postdoc at Yale Medical School, focused on enzymes and biochemistry. I really switched from chemistry to biology. And after that, I joined small tech and large tech. At the end, altogether, I am at Gilead Sciences for 21 years. So I've become a dinosaur there. I counted the years of I'm in school from 23 years. So what I do, actually, I do lots of, if you think of drug discovery, they're preclinical, which basically before the compound ever enter a human. But before enter human, there's a long process. We start with cells and then put into animal model and make sure it's efficacious and safe enough to move into human. Of course, after getting to human, the long process, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, finally approval. So my focus really is preclinical. That's pretty much what I do. I think, so I started basically working lab every day, and now I work less. I think that's my background. And if you're interested in biotech and how I call myself an industry scientist. I'm not a research lab, really like an academic lab, but I enjoy lots of collaboration with them, so I can share later on. So that's about me. Thank you.
Great, and I heard that you are very involved in COVID research as well. So we'd love to hear more about that. Olivia, let's hear from you.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Olivia, and wow, it's just really awesome to hear your backgrounds. Ashley and Joy, both of you, just really fascinating and kind of honored to be in such interesting and diverse science company. So my background is quite different from both of yours. And actually, in many ways, I'm glad that you introduced yourself first. I feel like we're having kind of like inverse career paths in a way. So I graduated from WashU in majoring in philosophy, neuroscience, and psychology, which I like to say qualified me for everything and nothing. And I found myself in consulting right after that. So I started my career in consulting, in innovation consulting. So I was helping Fortune 500 companies figure out what to make next. And it was really interesting, and I liked the innovation aspect. I like being creative and combining sort of analytics and creative thinking, but it felt too abstract to me. I really like to do more tactical hands-on things. So I pivoted my career from consulting and I got into product management. I was working at a small like mom and pop firm, and they were like, help us with the computers. So I taught myself to code and to design and sort of thinking more about how things on the web work. And from there, I took those skills that I had built and I worked for the Wall Street Journal and for Barron's.com, and I ran their multivariate experimentation testing program. So I was a product manager, which I sometimes hesitate to use the term because I think it's very jargony, and product manager describes like many different types of things that people can do on a technical side for a business. my specific flavor of product management was specifically in experimentation and multivariate testing. So I ran all of the experiments on wsj.com and barons.com, where we literally would set different variations of what the website would look like live to millions of users, and sort of see what happened with those variations and use the statistical analysis to see how we would improve the website or what we would make next. And then I did that for Vimeo for a little bit. But in the back of my mind, kind of none of this was really laddering up to the things that I felt like really that I cared about or felt deeply connected to. So I've made quite a dramatic career pivot, and I'm now pursuing my, eventually I will be applying to programs to get my doctorate in physical therapy. Right now I'm taking a very humbling step back in my career where I'm actually back in taking undergraduate classes and a post-bac at both Columbia and City College to get those like prereqs to go back and pursue that PhD. So hopefully one day we'll be a PT, but right now I'm sort of caught between those two worlds. So that's where I'm at.
I would love to hear more later about, I mean, all of your transitions are fascinating, and seems like they were very passion driven as well, or in pursuit of passion. But I'd love to hear more about how it feels to be both back in a post-bac. So we'll get to all of this very soon. So our first question is for all of you, actually, and I would love to hear a little bit more about what your current roles are, and what does the sector entail? What does a day-to-day look like, and who are the people that you work with closely? Again, anyone can go first. Maybe we'll start with Ashley, since I'm seeing you on the left of the screen.
Sure, no problem. All right, so I came into McKinsey as an associate. That's what you come in as once you have a PhD, an MBA, or a JD, anything advanced degree, you come in as an associate. And that role is basically driving the problem, right? Like you are solving the problem at its fundamental level. You are getting the data, you are working with your clients, you are analyzing that data, you're finding what the solution might be, and you're testing that with your peers as your engagement managers, your EDs, your engagement directors. We have a lot of jargon in McKinsey. But at the end of the day, like you are driving that problem forward, and then you're basically using the other people with a little bit more knowledge and skill to help guide that in the right direction and come up with the right solution. I have now transitioned into engagement manager. So I've been with McKinsey for a little over 3 years. At around the 2.5-year mark, I moved into the engagement manager role. And this is really a cornerstone role within McKinsey and Company. And so you have your associates, and this also goes into who do you work closely with. You have your associates, you have your engagement directors, you have your senior partners, you have content directors, you have experts coming in, but the engagement manager is really at the center of it all. They are responsible for managing the associates, the business analysts, making sure they're on track. They're responsible for managing the client. Is the client happy? Are we doing the right, are we doing right by them? Do they, foresee an issue coming up? Do we need to get ahead of that? You're managing your engagement directors, which are your partners, your senior partners, making sure that they're well informed. Are they in the loop? Do they need to be brought in at the right, what time do they need to be brought in? What questions do they need to be addressing? And so you're really kind of managing that full spectrum and making sure day to day, as well as the full set of the project, goes well. I love being an engagement manager. I think it's super fun. I think you get to solve really interesting problems and really think about how to manage up as well as manage down in the best way possible. Day to day, I love consulting because there really is no day to day. One day you could be staring down an Excel sheet for literally 12 hours. Another day you could be out in the field with, I work in operations. And so I could be, out in the field with a field crew, like doing repairs on a utility line and evaluating how fast they are, seeing, what their overall day looks like. Another day I could be giving a presentation in front of, the CEO or the CTO, about our progress. Another day we're holding problem solving sessions with our internal team, and so every day looks a little bit different. They're all very busy, but we make some amazing impact in a very, very short period of time. one of my favorite quotes from a guy that I worked with. I worked with him for 8 weeks. And at the end, he goes, Ashley, I was super skeptical of this work, 8 weeks ago. He said, but we've accomplished more in the last 8 weeks than I've been able to do in the last 8 years at this company. And came over and gave me a great big old hug. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's all worth it. And so I love the people that I love working closely with are really my associates and my clients, just because to see them gain confidence, get excited about the problem, get excited about the solution, and for the client at least, figuring out that they can control what they do in their company and they can make their day-to-day lives better and more efficient and more productive and happier and more satisfied is really the best parts of my job.
And just a quick follow-up. So you mentioned that you are in operations, which really has nothing to do with your background and sciences. Can you tell us why you chose to kind of major in that area?
Yeah. So when I first came to the firm, I did something that the firm is very supportive in terms of skill building. And so I did what's called a mini MBA. So for 9 weeks, they put me through a digital program. And then for 2 weeks, I was put through an in-person learning program where I basically did the first year of an MBA. And during all that, they expose you to, strategy, marketing and sales, risk, and operations was one of the categories. And I just really thought that it sounded pretty cool. And so when I first came to the firm, you get what's called a professional development manager. And they said, what do you want to do? And I was like, I'd like to try this operations thing. Don't care what industry, as long as it's not healthcare or life science related. I just knew that I wanted something new and fresh. And I pretty much never looked back. Like I've done a couple studies here and there outside of operations, and they just don't excite me. I love kind of like what Olivia was saying. Everything else is a little too high level. I love getting dirty with the clients, figuring out a solution that we can then implement, and you immediately see the results. Like I love being able to see how a company transforms and changes while we're there, and reaps the benefits of all of the hard work. And then also just operations people are they're cooler. I don't know. They wear jeans to the clients. They're like pretty chill, laid back. Engagements are longer, they're several months instead of a few weeks. And so everybody is a lot more conscious of people's lifestyle goals, and it's just more fun.
I was just gonna say, it sounds like a very good lifestyle choice. So good.
Yeah.
Good.
Lifestyle definitely factored in.
Great. Thank you for that. Joy, I'd love to hear from you.
It's very interesting to see Ashley's exciting life, because in comparison, being a scientist is much boring because of the time we measure success is definitely not in weeks or months. It's in years, decades. So for example, Remdesivir, we have been working on it, the Remdesivir, who's only approved small molecule treat COVID-19. We worked on for 10 years. So it gives you a sense of if you decide to go into bench science and science, really how to love it, because really you won't see the result. And often the time you fail, that your experiment fail, more than it succeed. Actually, when I heard Olivia talk about she tried a different permeation, that's exactly what we do on bench science, right? You try to treat the cells from different durations, you to look at the time course, right? Look at the dose dependent, all that. So I'll say, and often at each step of the drug discovery, you'll have a higher chance to fail. So bottom line, when you see a compound or drug get approved by FDA, you won't see how many failed before that. So actually, as a scientist, you do see all the failed steps. So often, actually, for a project leader, it's more important to kill a project early on. So that's a painful decision. But actually, talked about my role. I'm a scientist, so I started as a bench scientist. That's in the graduate school as a postdoc. Because the only thing can show you, especially early on, is your work. You generate a piece and you publish it, and got to be, so lots of characters I have to say, but for example, you're very careful, take good records of things, and be consistent. If you only change one variable at a time, right? yeah. And also just I have to say we do take summer interns. Definitely you can tell after a few times if someone cannot pipette, we often advise them to look for other opportunities, because if you cannot use pipette and the error bar is like 50%, then like forget about it. This is not for you. So truly, I would say that that's for something. So for someone who just can sit down, don't mind doing all the hard work, and so it's very interesting. But this all reward comes later on. That's why I highly recommend, if I can pitch here, is basically really I've seen so many smart, bright, dedicated young women go into the field. I highly recommend them to, if you can get a master degree or PhD degree, go for that. Because if you go to a pharmaceutical company just with a bachelor, it will take you much longer to reach to the point. But someone, in contrast, someone invests 5 years for a PhD degree or a little bit more. I mean, the postdoc is optional. It depends on how lucky you are. But really, the career progression just much faster for someone with a PhD. Just put out there. But what my day-to-day work like, when I started, I worked in lab. I mean, so for graduate students, there are no hours, there are no vacations. Pretty much, especially you're dying to leave the lab, you just work like, you can even eat in the lab. So basically put your hours day. So we probably heard horror stories. Someone do not, for example, work with one PI for a few years, and they have to change the thesis and they have to move to another PI. That happens. Someone spent 8 years or 10 years on the PhD. So that's kind of sad stories. Day-to-day, like work in the lab. So basically just work in the lab. That's how I got my PhD and got my postdoc. And also when you look for a job, definitely people look for track record. Track record in terms of success truly is the publication, at least in my mind, right? Because your advisor can say lots of things about you, but the thing that hard currency in the field of science is truly publication. Yeah, kind of because they're peer reviewed. They have been recognized before they get accepted by a journal. They have to be that. I guess who I work closely by, I think that it depends on where you are in your career. So when I started, I worked in lab, and like very low percentage of that spent at meetings. But now I sit in meetings all day long. Zoom meetings pretty much from beginning day to the end. That's why I choose to stand now. But in the meetings, who I work with, I meet with my associate, which I meet once a week to catch up their work and to see where they are. I like to them do their own thing, kind of interact with their own project leaders and projects, and only come to me for questions, priorities, because everywhere you will find that if you let everyone to put work on your list, the list never ends. And and you will feel like you are always chasing, you are behind. So really important to make yourself impactful, and people at the end truly say, oh, she really make a contribution, make impact, make that priority list really clear between you and your supervisor. Otherwise, you'll be always be someone who do it but doesn't get recognized. But the second group I work with is project leaders, project teams. So we'll review projects, where they are and what support my team need to provide. At the same time, we also negotiate, because project leaders always come to you and say, my project is the most important one. You got to put all this resource on me, on my project. And again, it's a priority. I have to balance so many different projects we support. And the last thing is we also go through project reviews. Basically, when you go there to the senior leaders to tell them why we propose we go this way, or why we should put more project and more resource on this. And the last thing which I really enjoy most is collaborations. Collaborations, because I have lots of collaborators. Most of them are academic labs, UNC, Vanderbilt, many of them. And we found when you find the right lab or the right PI to work with, this is really marriage in heaven, because often these collaborators, they spend their lifetime, on one particular subject, one virus, right? One kind of disease. And the pharmaceutical companies, one excitement about working for pharmaceutical companies is that basically you have so many therapeutic fields, you can switch Probably yesterday you work on HIV, today you work on HCV, then SARS. So everyone move very fast, and you are required to switch kind of your knowledge. You may know nothing about that virus yesterday, and then in a week, you should be expert in that based on the publications. So compared to the academic lab, is so great because they're so deep in the field, but we can bring the application part, right? We're great at developing drugs. We're drug developers. So use what expertise and use our drug development expertise. It just beautifully, we can work to each other's strengths and help each other. So that's what I think I always love to, I enjoy to collaborate with others. So I think that sums up my portion. Thank you.
Great. I just want to ask you, you mentioned very early on those sort of the failures and the disappointment. How do you handle the disappointment and keep sort of, persevering, and what keeps you going in this field?
Yeah, I think in research, often, for example, if I have a young scientists just come to the company. Often we will make sure this person's goals, their portion of it had a high chance of success. And then there's a portion of it just risk. We'll probably shoot in the dark, we would call it. Sometimes we even do quick and dirty studies, probably you've heard of that. So in a sense, that definitely there's people do accept that there's a high chance of failure. At the same time, we do make sure structure someone's goals in a way that they will feel lots of rewards, but at the same time they will challenge themselves with new studies, new ideas.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Olivia, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, my day-to-day currently looks like a lot of physics homework and biology reading. It's sort of a strange liminal time where I feel like I can neither fully talk about what the day-to-day looks like for a product manager, nor can I talk about what it looks like for a physical therapist. But I can give you my my previous impressions of what my career used to look like, as well as my budding impressions of what I think a career in physical therapy will look like. So from a product management perspective, I think, as I said before, I think it's kind of a jargony term. I mean, it obviously describes a career path, but there are so many different variations and flavors of what a product manager means. And so you can be a product manager who works on like front end stuff that consumers see. You can work on back end things like technical systems. You can have very like specialized niches like only mobile or only desktop or whatever. So there's lots of different iterations of that. But I think the key thing that unites all product managers is that they're sitting at the intersection between what the strategic business needs are, representing what the consumer wants, and then working closely with designers and engineers to sort of bring these visions together. So what you're ultimately doing is moving the digital domain of whatever business or company you're working for forward. So for the Wall Street Journal and Vimeo, what I would do basically is I didn't really own one piece of property. I didn't like just work on the homepage or just work on checkouts or subscriptions. My job was to sort of float over all of these things and think about how do we push them forward by doing multivariate experiments. So I worked really closely with finance people. I worked really closely with marketing and business people that had certain goals of revenue that they had to hit, and certain like brand expectations. But I also worked really closely with designers and engineers to actually come up with what these would look like, how we would technically implement these things, and then not like worked closely with the consumers, but really thought about deeply how this would be relevant and work better for our consumers, how this improved the product for the people who are regularly interacting and using it. So that's like a little bit of an overview of the kind of product management I did. And then in terms of physical therapy, who knows what my day-to-day will look like there. I think that one thing that I'm learning, and I guess if anyone's interested in the career of PT or just for general interest, I think that when we think of physical therapy, we think of it mostly as outpatient orthopedic. Like I tore my ACL or I sprained my ankle, I'm going to go to an outpatient ortho place. But the world of PT is just way, way bigger than that. Anything that you think of like what a doctor could be doing or different fields, the same thing applies for PT. So you can do geriatric, you can do pediatric, you can do pain management, you can do neuro, you can do cardiovascular. There's many different flavors of PT. There's inpatient settings, there's outpatient settings, there's home travel. So there's just many different types of PT. And I guess that's one thing that gets me very excited about the career path. So a little overview of both.
do you have an inclination of where you'll go, which path you'll take, or it's still too early to tell?
I think not even being in PT school yet, it's perhaps too early to tell. If there's one thing I know about life is you make a plan and then it changes. So I think I'm very interested in orthopedic stuff, but I think that's probably exposure bias. But I'm also really interested in pain management and things to do with neuro, given my college background and just personal experiences with that.
So interesting. So cool. Thank you for that. I think I want to put the next question to Joy. So Joy, what drew you to your field? And I know you told us a little bit about your education, but any other details would be helpful. And any noticeable successes and struggles, and then of course, advice for those interested in studying or entering your field.
Kind of interesting what drew me to my field. I think lots of by chance. Truly, it's very interesting because I want to go to medical school, but I got rejected because I'm too short when I apply in China. So like, fine, okay, I'm going to a school and learn how to make medicine. Yeah, so I think that's how I started that. And it's actually come back to changes or change your career, because truly, if you ask me 20, 30 years ago, did I plan to be here? No, I wasn't. So kind of just often come back to, for example, choose between medicinal chemistry, which I got my PhD in, and why do I switch to biology? If you ask me, sound like I'm so smart, I choose that. No, because I couldn't find a postdoc position as a medicinal chemist. It's a very male concentrated field. Yeah, so basically that's really how I end up. Notable success. Again, I think if I can tell now, okay, well, Remdesivir, I'm one of the inventors of Remdesivir, so I'll call that. Struggles, I can definitely tell you, because I have been at my position for 21 years company, and 17 years I haven't been promoted. But I have to say, I recently got promoted. I can share with you, but I can later on tell you that part of that is to my own kind of not knowing how I should do it. So that's why I make the mission. Whoever I want to listen, I want to advise them just early on what you should prepare for yourself. Because before, I always prepare myself as a scientist. I make the most beautiful data or publish the really strong paper, but that's just part of you. You should, always develop yourself in terms of public speaking, communication, because early on, I feel I isolate myself. I made myself a typical scientist, nerd, wear glasses, had all the pens on your lab coat. And I do not want to social with anyone, and I work in lab the whole time. No, retrospectively, that's not good, even not good for my science. So that's why I'm saying, for all the STEM people out there, don't ever think, the reason I go into STEM because I don't want to do public speaking, I don't want to communication. Now I look back, actually, on the contrary, since you are going into such a special field, you're speaking the jargons that only probably a handful of people around you know, it's critically even more important to learn to communicate in a very concise way and alter that based on your audience. Not just what I know. Oh, I have a PhD, I have a postdoc, so I know all this. No, actually, I should tell you what will benefit you. But took me all this year to figure it out. So last thing, what I'm advised for those interested in studying. Okay, so I come back to this really, you like it, you enjoy it, and try to get a higher education, master or PhD, because not just the title, the struggle you've been put through for getting a PhD degree or for getting a master degree really prepare you for lots of things to come. And you can see clearly here, you get a PhD, there's so many doors can open for you. And definitely you don't have to go to lab. If you don't like lab work, you don't have to go to a pharmaceutical company. If you feel that's such a long, torturous path to have the product come to the completion. That's all.
I really like that you mentioned the personal development piece in all of this because, a lot of us gravitate to fields where we have strengths, but also because we're hiding from our weaknesses. um, we all do that. So, public speaking, communications, is there anything else that you see as a trend for people who go into STEM that they can really push themselves to work on?
Anything else? So come back to the hard skills we all have. We know we have to put hours, get good at one field, but come back to the soft skills, public speaking and priority. So basically learn to not you can seek out, just to ask your advisor or ask people senior and you just tell me, what do you think the priority? Because I found so many young women, they have all the drive, they have all the energy, and they treat everything as if everything need to put out fire. For example, if they receive an email from a VP at 5 o'clock in the afternoon said, I want this, they feel they just have to, give the answer within 30 minutes. Then they will text their co-workers and just put pressure on everyone else, but they didn't realize that they should ask, do you truly, how soon do you need this one? So really, because if you build your reputation as someone who do not have the big picture, who do not sit back and analyze the situation, do I need to push everyone crazy just to get that answer? Then you will build a reputation as someone who do not have the big picture, which is not good, which is definitely not something good to have. That's my thing. I think last thing is promote each other. So I heard a really great woman leader once said there should be a special place in hell for women who do not help women. So I truly believe that. I truly believe that, because only when we help each other, we can make our force. Because we all heard about, this is old boys club, right? We can form our own club, right? We can do the forever young girls club, So we can, work together. Definitely that help. That's all. Thank you.
Those are really great. The prioritization is really important. I'm realizing that as a manager, but yes. I wish that I had realized that more as on the employee side of things, to really just speak up and ask what is the priority here. When my interns ask, I am so appreciative, because it actually makes me do some thinking, and the promotion of each other, so important. So thank you for that. The next question, I don't have this pointed to anyone, so please feel free, one of you, to take this. But we're looking at what mentorship means to you, and is there anyone that inspired you throughout your career? And what do you yourself look for when you're looking for a mentor or a mentee? And a few of you can speak if you feel passionate about this question.
I think building off of what Joy said, in terms of promoting others, I think that's a really good feel for mentorship. And so when for mentorship, for me, it's people who are excited about me as a person, and able to engage and answer some tough questions. Importantly, I think it's critical to distinguish between a sponsor and a mentor. They are not the same thing. And so a mentor is not somebody who is expected to get you to the next level. They are there as a sounding board. They should be a trusted person. They're potentially somebody you want to emulate. I have a really good mentor in McKinsey. She is not in my field. She does work in a completely different area, in a completely different sector. We crossed paths on one study, and I was like, she is pretty badass. I want to be like her. She seems so confident, and she seemed like she had all the answers. And so I quickly tried to build a relationship first starting off as friends, and then one where she's a year ahead of me. And so asking her, what did you go through at this stage, and what should I be thinking about as I move to the next stage? But she is not somebody, obviously, that's going to be opening doors for me, right? A sponsor is somebody very high up in an organization who you won't talk with very often, but when push comes to shove, they will give you the opportunities to move up. And so I have a sponsor at McKinsey who, when I was going up for engagement manager, it's a very critical period of time where you're not like, nobody knows if you can actually do that job, right? Like, you've been an associate, and now all of a sudden you're supposed to be leading this entire engagement, right, and orchestrating it from all angles, as we discussed earlier. You really have to have somebody kind of go to bat for you and say, like, sure, let's try this out. And when my name came up, the sponsor said, yes, Ashley, I know her. I personally want to give her this opportunity. I'm going to give her this chance to be an engagement manager, right? Like, that is a sponsor who's a senior partner who said, I want to go to bat for her and take this chance on her. So a mentor for me is somebody where we build a relationship organically. I feel like I'm comfortable enough to bounce the hard questions off of and get their responses. And I trust that they're going to give me the feedback that is true and honest, not necessarily what I want to hear, but what I should be hearing. And that often the person that I want to emulate, because, how did you do that is a great question. People get excited about talking about themselves, right? And if you want to follow that path, then it's very easy and clear. You just follow kind of what they did. So that's what I look for. And then for a mentee, it's, somebody that's excited about, work that I'm not necessarily that I'm doing, but like in the general sphere of things. So consulting, right? And ask for my opinion and tries to build that relationship with me. That's somebody I get excited about and I want to invest more in.
Great, thank you. That's so helpful. The next question, I think we'll give this to both Olivia and Ashley. And since you both pivoted careers, what prompted that pivot and how did you navigate the change?
Sure. Well, I feel like I've changed careers a couple of times now, at least like from consulting to product management to PT. But I guess the switch from product management to PT feels like the most profound pivot, and probably on the surface, like, what? That doesn't make a lot of sense. But to me, I feel like it ladders quite clearly. And I guess when it comes time to actually apply for PT schools, I can give you my my personal statement. You can tell me if it actually does make sense. But I think that being in business, in the business world, I became like very interested in business and being an entrepreneur. And I had a really strong interest in starting my own business. At the same time, I became increasingly disinterested in working for big companies. I can see the value in it, and I think solving big complex problems is really interesting. But I am the byproduct of two teachers who are also artists and doing really human-centered work that is centered on like face-to-face contact with an individual. Is something that I realized was really missing for me and was really important for me as I continue to grow my career and like the kind of work that I want to be doing. And then at the same time, I also, as I was working at Dow Jones, at the Wall Street Journal, I got really interested and deep into the world of Olympic weightlifting, and sort of sparked a fascination for me with the human body and how our bodies work and how we're built and how we can optimize and improve performance. And then I really think that at the end of the day, like being a product manager is very similar to being a physical therapist, right? Like you're being handed down a problem from, a doctor, as if you're a PT, and you're being handed down a problem if you're a product manager from like the larger business org. And they're like, well, there's a problem here and it's generally this, and like figure out kind of what to do. And every time the problem is going to be a little bit different. Every time you're going to have to come up with a different solution. And it's the curiosity and the problem solving really to me that I think are quite parallel. But I think as a PT, I can focus that on helping an individual and hopefully creating my own business to do that.
I love that you just connected the dots there between optimizing performance, and it's so interesting how we can find particular aspects of something we enjoy doing or our strengths, and then translate that to a totally different field and something that might take us on a different path and adventure as you're going down. So thank you for talking us through that. Ashley, love to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I talked a little bit earlier. I would say just think about your personal and professional goals, your passions, and that is what that is what made me pivot, and how I navigated it was just staying kind of true to those and reevaluating them. And so I'm not saying that consulting is my end all be all. My husband and I evaluate it about every 6 months. Is it still meeting my personal and professional goals? Am I still happy? Am I still, satisfied with what we're doing? And if the answer continues to be yes, then we're good. And if it doesn't, it changes. And I think that that's the biggest thing that helped me when coming into consulting, was that I thought, as a STEM degree, that my path was predetermined. Like, I thought that I had to go down a specific path, and there were no ancillary paths. There were no offshoots available, right? And that just, to me, kind of like freaked me out a little bit, that there was no offshoot. And now I realize that you can literally do anything. You can go be that awesome bench scientist like Joy and invent this amazing chemical that's basically saving the world, right? And but you don't necessarily have to. You can also go down a lot of different paths, and you don't ever have to stick to that path. If that's the path you choose, do it for a couple of years, and then if it's not what you love, you can just change. And Olivia is a perfect example of that, and I love that. We are not in the days of our parents, where you have to do something for your entire life, and there's really no option to move. I think moving is one of the most exciting parts of life at this point, and so I can't wait to see where, what I'll be doing in 2 years. It may be completely different than what I'm doing now, and I love that.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of like risk taking and fear in it, but it's also really exciting, and I think the excitement outweighs the other two. Ashley, last question before we open up to our Q&A, because I do see that we have a few questions here. But so how has the field evolved, and how do you predict it's going to continue to evolve?
Yeah, so consulting, at least from McKinsey and Company, was very traditionally Monday through Friday, you travel to the client. It was very important that we sit face to face with our clients, that we work hand in hand with them. And before COVID, it was pretty much like that. Like, there was no question, this is what you do. And there was no opportunity or option to change that. With COVID, we basically forced ourselves to realize that is not in fact the case. Like, we have to be virtual, and guess what? Things are moving just fine. To be honest, I think they move slower. I think it is harder to make those personal connections, to build trust, which is critical for the field of consulting and operations, because the people that you're working with have to truly believe in it in order to implement it. So I think that has been substantially harder, but nonetheless, it proves that we can do it. And so I think one of the biggest things in terms of the evolution of consulting is that it will no longer be Monday through Thursday travel mandatory to the client. I think there will be a lot more wiggle room and a lot more active conversations on how do we make this more of a lifestyle for our consultants as well as our clients. Like, I had one project where literally all of my clients were also, because we had multiple sites, they were traveling with me Monday through Thursday, and that can be draining too. And so that's one thing that's really big and changing. Another thing is that I think, at least for McKinsey, and I'm not sure about the other firms, but at least for McKinsey, we're trying to think broader about what is consulting moving forward. And historically, it's been strategy consulting. That is no longer the basis of what we do. Obviously, there's still a lot of strategy, but operations, risk, leadership development, organizations, we do a lot of work in those spaces. And more recently, January of last year, we acquired a software company called Orpheus. I rotated with this company for 4 months prior to going on maternity leave. And this is the next wave of what I think consulting is that we typically go in, we find out, hey, you have terrible spend data, you should get your spend under control. And then we refer them to a bunch of companies that can help them do that. Whereas now we're going to say, you need to get your spend under control. You need to figure it out. Like, here's our product. And so I think that we're going to actually be providing more of the solutions to our clients versus saying you need a solution, here are some opportunities, which I think is a really interesting and exciting space, brand new, at least to what we're doing. And so I know in my practice, we have like 6 solutions that we've rolled out and that we have folks actively using. And it's pretty exciting to see what we can do with that.
Super exciting. I would love to turn this over to our Q&A, and I'm going to let Meghana take this away.
All right, awesome. We got some really, really good questions. And the first one that I'll kind of address to our panelists here today is, how exactly did you know that going into STEM was for you? So one of our attendees personally has had a hard time trying to determine whether she wants to switch over towards STEM or stick with business.
Well, I guess I kind of did the inverted path, or the path that it sounds like this question asker is on. Is like, I kind of graduated with a generic liberal arts degree, and I think that you can pretty much find your way into business no matter what if you want to. It might be harder to find your way sort of like casually into a hardcore, like, you know, science like that Joy is doing if you're not more deliberate about what you're majoring in. I think that if you really are passionate about doing some hard science, it's probably easier to do that now in your undergrad than come back to it later like I am, but that's also a viable path. But I think that, at least from my experience, I'm a strong advocate for, if you're not sure what to do, just get out, get a degree and do something, because doing something with your career and just having some kind of job, even if you hate it, will give you really great information about what you want to do next. So if you do have doubt about, you know, dedicating your life to doing one very particular niche thing, then, you know, it's okay to experiment. There's plenty of time in life to figure out what you want to do next. So I don't know if that answers your question or just sort of creates more questions, but I think that you can do a science degree or a business degree and end up in both science or business. And I think we're kind of all 3 evidence of that.
Awesome. That kind of leads me to my next question, and a lot of the attendees have asked different variations of this. But what advice would you give for STEM college students looking to go into consulting, especially since students who come from STEM backgrounds don't really come from business backgrounds?
Yeah, my number one is, like, don't go to graduate school if you know that you're kind of wanting to go into consulting, because it's like, you don't need it. Business analyst is by far the number one best career after graduating, in my personal opinion, and I wish I had done it. Like, I spent 5 years in a PhD. It was awesome. I loved it. And did 3 more years as a postdoc. It was great. Fine. But I'm now, like, I started as an associate, which is honestly the exact same job as a business analyst, just with slightly more client exposure, high stakes, you know, projects. But they're basically exactly the same, except that business analysts get, during their 3rd year, they get to do like whatever they want, you know, fully funded by the firm. They can go do their MBA, fully paid for. They can go do a PhD, paid for up to a certain extent. And they have no questions asked, offers to return. They make way more than I was making as a PhD student. And you know, it's just like, it's a really cool freaking job. And like, as you know, as a 22-year-old, whatever, you can be like advising CEOs of stuff. Like, what is this? It's awesome. It's crazy. So that's my first advice, is like, if you're interested in consulting, like, do not do the graduate, just like go for it. If you're already in graduate school, no worries. You can still go for it. You just have an associate job and you won't have any offers to return. You don't get to do anything cool during your 3rd year. You'll just be expected to become an engagement manager. And yeah, I think that that's like my biggest thing. And then, you know, if you want to go into consulting, there's tons of resources online, tons of resources, most likely in your schools. Just search consulting or PhD consulting or STEM to consulting, and you'll have more than enough to look through. Just connect with people, run cases. It's a crazy interview process. So
Yeah, definitely. And my next question is, what advice would you have for someone in graduate school who is transitioning out of academia? So how do you make connections, etc.?
When you say transitioning out of academia, so basically they're looking for an industry job, I assume. They don't want to go with academic path, become a professor. That okay. How do you make a connection? I guess the chance for you to get hired by an industry will increase if you go for a small biotech. So basically, from what I hire, I can see from a big pharma or biotech, definitely come look at which lab you come from, and what work you have done. If you have science Nature paper, I mean that will help a lot. And if you have done postdoc job, I think help. So for someone fresh from college that hadn't done something fantastic in the field, I think it's hard to hire in as a, your competitiveness will be relatively weak compared to someone who come a name brand, who had done lots of well-recognized from recognized journals. So I think the transition, my advice, going to do postdoc, you can do that, and also start with from biotech, start from a small biotech company. The entering, I think, will be easier. I hope that answers the question.
A follow up on that, any tactical suggestions on how to start networking or making connections with those companies, even if it is biotech that you're going into? Is it starting with LinkedIn? Is it direct email outreach and creating relationships, or taking someone as a mentor and starting to sort of nurture that relationship?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Almost you have to make a name out of yourself. So you may know the people, but at the end, it's still a hiring committee, put you as a candidate along with others. So knowing the right person, get your resume in, probably the 10% of the chance. Yeah, I don't know, knowing the right person will help you greatly. If I mean, all the, because at entering level, everyone is really based on, judge on their, actually true, technical skill, their publication, also their soft skills, their communication skills. So that will definitely, and whether teamwork, that will definitely take into consideration. But often from what I can see, for example, we start to enter into a new therapeutic field, or we're starting to solve a new problem, and you happen to have that background, and that will help a lot. So yeah. I think that's my answer.
Awesome. And this question is kind of catered to Ashley, but do you think that face-to-face consulting needs to come back after the virus, or at least to some extent?
I personally would love to go back to face-to-face. Zoom, I think, is way more draining than just like going to my client. But nonetheless, I do have a new 3-month-old, and I do have a 4-year-old. And it was hard to be away from them 4 days a week. If we can, I think that a hybrid model is most likely what's going to happen. I mean, there are some partners that may never want to travel again. There are some partners that may want to travel all the time. And so you'll just kind of have to figure out who those folks are. But I think for the majority, it will be a hybrid. And I will push for a hybrid for my teams and their well-being. So it might be something like, we only need to travel 2 days a week, or we need to do 1 week on, 2 weeks off, or something like that. And I don't know, there hasn't been official guidance yet as to what that should or would look like, but I'm sure it's being developed. But that's what, I would push for my teams. And as an engagement manager, luckily, that's something that I get a big say in. And so for me, I would love to travel Monday night or Tuesday morning and come back Wednesday night, or Thursday, depending on what it is, and just have a few extra days with my kids, with my husband. But I love the face-to-face. There's nothing easier than being in a room with all my associates and just looking up and being like, hey, you guys want to check out early? versus like emailing them or like texting them and being like, hey, what are people doing in 15 minutes? Like everything just takes longer. Like I just like to be like looking up and being like, hey, let's check out and let's go to dinner or whatever. And I miss going out for dinner. So yeah, I think in person will happen. I like it's a critical part of relationship building. I just don't think it'll be as widespread.
Yeah, I definitely miss the face-to-face interaction, so I can relate to that. And this is just kind of a general question again, but how difficult would you say it is to enter into an industry in which you may not have much specific experience in? So maybe entering the energy industry with only experience in, for example, bioengineering.
It depends on what you want to do. If you're going into consulting, there's literally no barriers. Like we have no care at all of what your background is unless you're going into a particular practice or expected to provide that expertise. As a generalist consultant, we're looking for people that are creative, that are motivated, that like solving big, hairy problems, and like doing it with people. That's literally it. Those are the things that we look for. And we give you all the skill sets that you need when you go into a client. So I was on a client in energy. I literally day zero had no idea how a utility made money. How a utility company made money. And by day one, I knew. And then by day three, I could tell my clients exactly what we were doing and how we were going to do it way better than, they didn't know what we were doing and I knew exactly what we were going to do and how we were going to do it, right? So we have the skills, we have the knowledge, we have the experts to give you what you need. So there's literally need to know nothing about what you're going into and you'll do great. If you want to go into a more technical position, if you want to do some really cool deep dive stuff like Joy does, if you want to do, if you want to go into energy and you want to be, somebody that's going to work for a specific energy company, like, yeah, you're going to need the hard skill background. I could not, those are even positions that I probably can't go into at this point. I can go into the business side of things, but I could not go into like refitting transformers or anything like that.
Perfect. I want to be mindful of everyone's time here because I see that we are over by 1 minute. So I would love to stop and thank Ashley, Joy, Olivia, and Megadeth for your time and your perspectives. And thank you for all of you Grasshoppers for joining and letting us get to know you. We have 2 quick, exciting announcements at Grasshopper. We've launched an ambassador program. Our Grassambassadors, who are both genders, by the way, or all genders, I should say, are the backbone of our community. And by promoting Grasshopper's values and sharing our news and organizing events, you'll get marketing experience, kudos for your resume, network with other Grassambassadors, male allies, and the Grasshopper community, and of course, move the needle for women in the workplace. And then secondly, we've just launched Grasshopper Campus Clubs. And this is your opportunity to get premium access to about 9 to 10 months worth of both professional and personal leadership skills and job acquisition skills to help you really find success and retain work during the pandemic. So check out our website for more details on both of those programs. And of course, we are excited to see you on our next webinar in March, which will be in celebration of International Women's Day. And in the meantime, connect with us on social at Grasshopper. Have a great evening, and thank you again to all of our panelists. You were so fantastic. This is so helpful to all of our Grasshoppers listening. So thank you. Good night, everyone.
Bye.